Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. We have a great show for you today. First, Rob Reiner's Eerie Premonition. His son could harm him. He knew his son was going to kill him. The associate of the singer David with a 4, he was arrested in Montana for failing to show up to the probe regarding the teen's death. Kohberger still not adjusting to life behind bars. A man pleads guilty to first-degree murder for killing his pregnant sister. Wait till you find out why. Another story of a senseless murder and a random assault of a 7-year-old. Unbelievable. We've got this day in legal history, our legal quote of the day, and our dumb criminal. Let's talk about it.
All right, lawyer.
Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't, like if you do, leave me a comment below, and make sure you hit that little bell for notifications. And remember, you can check us out on any of your favorite podcasting apps. Now, before we get to today's docket, which is great, let me tell you a couple of things. First, now there was a big storm. It went through the South. Hundreds of thousands of people are out without power. Boy, do you think they wish they had maybe prepared a little bit better? You think so? They always do. And it's never a good time to, saying, wow, we should have prepared better. Next time we'll be ready. Well, now is the time to get ready because you don't know when disaster is going to strike. That's why you need to go to crimetalkprep.com and get your emergency food supply today, ladies and gentlemen. And if you order now their winter kit, you're going to get $400 worth of free gear, which includes a stove, so you don't need to rely on anybody. There's a kit that you can have your solar, that you can put up a solar panel and charge all of your devices. Everything you need, ladies and gentlemen. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Be prepared now. It's not paranoia. It's called preparedness. So go to crimetalkprep.com. Get your emergency food kit today. Now, we mentioned yesterday that we're pushing the merch, okay? And sometimes you got to do a little motivation to get people going with the perch. We sold a bunch of merch yesterday, and we're going to sell more today. And you know why? Because just like I told you, let me just pull it out here. Just like I told you yesterday, anybody that buys something between yesterday and next Monday, you go into a drawing, and we will then award you $100 in cash, ladies and gentlemen. So listen, whether you buy a $5 keychain or you buy an limited edition Crime Talk sweatshirt, listen, if you win, it can all but pay for itself. I'll take it right out of my money clip here and give it to you. We'll keep it out there just so you can remind yourself to go to the merch links below and order today. All right, let's go ahead and get to the docket for Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. And first on the docket, Rob Reiner's Eerie Premonition. He knew his son was going to harm him, possibly even kill him. So as we all know, the tragic deaths of the filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, were preceded by a deeply unsettling moment at a holiday gathering where the director reportedly expressed profound fear regarding his son. On December 13th, 2025, Rob Reiner, who was then 78, attended the Christmas party hosted by comedian Conan O'Brien in his Los Angeles mansion alongside with his wife, Michelle, and their son, Nick. Now, according to multiple sources familiar with that event, Rob Reiner confided to others that he was petrified and believed his own son could harm him. Now, this statement describes as a shocking and heart-wrenching admission reflected the director's evident apprehension about Nick's behavior and potential for violence. He knew his son was going to kill him, ladies and gentlemen. He knew it. Now, attendees reported that Nick Reiner acted in obviously a disruptive and erratic manner during that gathering, which unsettled other guests. A heated argument erupted between Nick and his parents, escalating to a loud confrontation that prompted the host to discourage fellow partygoers from contacting police. Now, the family departed the event shortly thereafter amid the family tension. Anyway, the following day, December 14th, 2025, Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner were discovered deceased, killed, murdered in their Brentwood residence, having sustained multiple sharp force injuries. Now, police determined that the deaths were a homicide, and Nick Reiner was arrested later that evening on suspicion of murder. He was subsequently charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, including special circumstances for multiple homicides and the alleged use of a deadly weapon. Now, Nick Reiner, the middle of the couple's 3rd children, has had a documented history of substance abuse and mental health issues, including a prior year-long conservatorship in 2020 involving involuntary psychiatric treatment. Now, reports indicate recent adjustments to his medication may have contributed to increased instability. And as of January of 2026, his initial private defense attorney withdrew from the case, leading to representation by the public defender's office with an arraignment scheduled for February 23rd. Obviously, he remains in custody without bail, and prosecutors have not yet decided whether to pursue the death penalty. Now, obviously, this sequence of events has drawn significant attention because of the complexities of the family support in this case, and obviously the severe mental illness that obviously Nick Reiner has. Now, and it's even more significant given it's in a prominent household where he had the best medical treatment that money could buy, basically, and they still couldn't help him. Anyway, Rob Reiner's premonition at that party underscores the gravity of the concerns that preceded the tragedy. And obviously, this case is going to continue to unfold here in the next couple of weeks. But this just goes to show, ladies and gentlemen, and I hate to sound like the guy that just is negative, because I'm not. I'm the eternal optimist, right? I'm a defense attorney. I'm always hoping for the best. I'm always hoping for people to succeed, that they're gonna do well. But oftentimes, past performance is indicative of future results, and you have to be realistic. And sometimes, no matter how much money you have, how much support you have, it just isn't gonna matter. Sometimes some people are just not wired right. And no matter what you do, no matter how much love you give to them, how much medical treatment, mental health treatment you get them, at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. And the result is going to end like we see so constantly, where people with mental health issues ultimately wind up committing violent acts, oftentimes murder. And, you know, it is a difficult situation, but sometimes, and this is, sometimes the hardest part of my job is telling people what they don't want to hear. And not that I was ever Rob Reiner's attorney or, if I was talking to him, but somebody had to tell this guy, man, you just got to let him go. And I know they tried that. They said, go live on the streets. If you come back, you got to do treatment. He tried everything. I get it. It's a father's love for his son, but he knew deep down, and he literally predicted the future that night at that holiday party, that he was going to be murdered. And it's maybe sometimes being a little too optimistic, I guess, maybe hoping things are going to change. They're going to be different this time. And in reality, it was just the same old stuff, but the behavior just keeps escalating. Next on the docket, an associate of the singer David, spelled with a 4. Yeah, he was arrested in Montana for not showing up at the little hearing that they were going to have. So Neil Langston, a 23-year-old social media influencer and Twitch streamer known online as Neo the Asian, was taken into custody on January 22nd at his mother's residence in Helena, Montana. Now, police executed an out-of-state warrant issued by the Los Angeles Police Department for his alleged failure to appear as a grand jury witness. Now, according to court and jail records from Lewis and Clark County, Montana, Langston was booked on the warrant and initially held without bond. He was subsequently transferred to the LAPD custody, where he posted a $60,000 bond and when it was released over the weekend. Now, the arrest stems from the investigation into the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, whose decomposed remains were discovered on September 8th of 2025 in the trunk of an impounded Tesla registered to David, whose legal name is David Anthony Burke. Now, the vehicle had been towed from the Hollywood Hills And after being abandoned and the discovery followed reports of a foul odor coming from the car at the impound lot. That's where they found Miss Rivas Hernandez. Anyway, Miss Rivas Hernandez from the Inland Empire region of California had been reported missing in April of 2024 at the age of 13. Now, police have described this case as a murder investigation with the remains partially dismembered and severely decomposed due to prolonged exposure to the heat. Now, the exact cause and manner of death remain undetermined by the coroner's office. Now, Burke, who's also 20, has been identified as a person of interest and, according to law enforcement, a suspect in the case. Now, investigators believe the disposal of the body likely involved assistance from others. No arrests have been made in connection with the homicide itself, and Burke has reportedly ceased cooperating with the detectives. As well, he probably should, because he's a target and it's his car, and they believe that maybe she was killed in his house that he was renting. Yeah, any lawyer worth their salt would tell him to shut your mouth. Anyway, a grand jury has been convened since late 2025 with multiple witnesses providing testimony. Now, Langston, who has been publicly associated with Burke through photographs and social media appearances, was compelled to testify in the proceedings, and it remains unclear whether he was the specific uncooperative witness referenced in earlier reports back in December of 2025, which described a tense interaction between prosecutors and an attorney. Now, the LAPD Robbery Homicide Division continues to lead the inquiry with limited public comments available due to the case's active status. Now, obviously, all individuals are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. This just goes to show you the power of the grand jury. Obviously, a grand jury has certain roles. It can obviously indict, and it also has investigative powers where they can issue subpoenas. They can force people to come and testify, even if they don't want to, under oath. And the prosecutor can even give them immunity in those proceedings if they need them to, to compel their testimony. And it is interesting. I can recently say maybe I had a client that went before a grand jury, and let's just say nobody showed up. But the DAs are like, hey, try to get them. We want to be cooperative, all those kinds of things. Or in this particular case, like, oh, you don't show up? Guess what? We're going to get a warrant for your arrest, and we're going to arrest you, and then we'll bring you back, and now you're going to testify. And if you don't, guess what? We'll keep doing it over and over and over again. So hopefully this will compel some testimony, and maybe there'll be an indictment in this particular case, and there can be justice, because let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Hernandez did not put herself in the trunk of that Tesla after dismembering herself. No, she did not. Somebody had something to do with it. We'll see. We'll see who the grand jury thinks had something to do with it. Next, Brian Kohberger still not adjusting to life behind bars. That's right. Brian Kohberger, the man convicted of the 2022 murders of the 4 University of Idaho students, is reportedly facing significant challenges in his adjustment to life at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, where he is serving those 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Now, for those who don't know about this case, it occurred back on November 13th of 2022. And 4 college students, Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were fatally stabbed in an off-campus residence. Now, as we talked about yesterday, we believe that everything should be released so that we can check out what pure evil looks like. We gave you a little glimpse of the autopsy summary of how many times all of those young people were stabbed to death in the head and the chest area, ladies and gentlemen. That's not after deliberation. I don't know what is. It's pure evil. So go check out yesterday's video. Anyway, Kohberger, who was obviously a graduate student at the nearby university, entered that guilty plea and was sentenced on July 23rd of 2025 to life in prison, plus an additional 10 years for the burglary charge. Now, since his transfer to the maximum security facility near Kuna, Idaho in late July of 2025, Kohberger has been housed in the J Block, a unit designated for high-profile and high-risk inmates, and reports indicates that he spends the majority of his time, approximately 23 hours per day, in a single occupancy cell. And sources familiar with conditions at that institution prosecution have described ongoing verbal harassment from other inmates, including taunts, communication through air vents, which reportedly occur around the clock and have caused considerable distress to Mr. Kohberger. Can you imagine being awakened in your sleep by people harassing you? Well, Brian Kohberger, I guess it's better than being stabbed in the head 25 times, wouldn't it be? Anyway, Kohberger submitted multiple formal complaints to prison staff, citing issues such as persistent noise, verbal threats, including references to sexual assault and other disruptions, and such as alleged flooding in the unit. You know how they do that, right? They stuff their toilets full and they just keep flushing it and it overflows. Yeah, it's a mess. Anyway, in one instance, he requested a transfer to a different housing area, describing the environments involving, quote, minute-by-minute harassment. Anyway, more recently, in developments reported late last year, Kohberger's alleged escalated his grievances by telling staff he might harm himself if not relocated from the J block. Now, according to accounts from correctional insiders and retired law enforcement professionals, these statements were framed as conditional on meeting his demands for a housing change, prompting questions about whether they presented genuine intent or a strategic effort to secure different accommodations. Prison protocols, such as threats to themselves, will be treated seriously, potentially involving evaluations or intervention, though no public confirmation of any outcome has been detailed. Now, the Idaho Department of Corrections has acknowledged that Kohberger has had many complaints about inmate interactions, stating that staff maintain a safe and orderly environment and that communications among inmates is common in such facilities. And, officials there have not publicly disclosed any specific disciplinary actions or transfers in response to Brian Kohberger's requests. Now, obviously, Kohberger is struggling with the realities of his long-term incarceration in a high-security setting where he's isolated yet subject to ongoing antagonism from his peers. What do they call that sometimes, ladies and gentlemen? What do they refer to that as? Maybe karma? Oh, yeah. Like I said, being woken up at night because people are taunting you, like I said, it sure beats being stabbed in the skull or stabbed in the chest while you're trying to sleep, being attacked in your own home. But, Brian, you hang in there, buddy. You hang in there. Next, a man pleads guilty to first-degree murder for killing his pregnant sister and her unborn child. But wait, why? So in a tragic case that has shocked the community, Jack Joseph Ball, a 24-year-old resident of Lakeville, Minnesota, entered guilty pleas on January 21st of this year to premeditated first-degree murder and premeditated first-degree murder of an unborn child. Now, these charges relate to the deaths of his 30-year-old sister, Bethany Ann Israel of Bloomington, and her unborn child, who was approximately 17 to 18 weeks gestation at the time. So this incident all took place back in May of 2024 when Israel visited Ball's residence for dinner. After several hours passed without contact, family members grew concerned. Their mother arrived at the home to check on the siblings and observed Ball fleeing the property. Upon entering, she discovered substantial amounts of blood and promptly called police. The officers found a large pool of blood in the kitchen, along with blood-stained tools, including a saw, hatchet, and several large knives. Further search of the residence revealed dismembered human remains. Additional evidence emerged when a nearby resident in Rosemont reported seeing a man later identified as Ball placing what appeared to be a body part on the doorstep via some home security footage. Police located Ball shortly afterwards in a neighborhood backyard where he sustained a self-inflicted neck injury. He was ultimately transported to the hospital for treatment before taken into custody. What investigators were able to recover were journals written by Ball in which he expressed anger towards his sister, stating that her pregnancy rendered her, quote, no longer innocent, end quote. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office determined that Israel's death resulted from complex homicidal violence, with the unborn child also succumbing as a consequence of the attack. Now, Ball was initially charged with second-degree murder offenses, but a grand jury indicted him in January of 2025 on 2 counts of each of premeditated first-degree murder and intentional second-degree murder. Under the plea agreement, the second-degree charges were dismissed, and prosecutors recommended a mandatory life in prison sentence without the possibility of parole. Ball had asserted a mental illness defense prior to the plea, which may be addressed in subsequent pleadings. Anyway, the Dakota County Attorney, Kathy Kinna, described the case as profoundly disturbing, noting the horrific nature of the crime scene encountered by law enforcement. She affirmed that her office remains committed to securing justice for the victims and providing support of those affected family members. Needless to say, Ball remains in custody pending formal sentencing. Next, a totally senseless murder in a tragic incident that prompted prosecutors to seek the death penalty. A 24-year-old man has been charged with the fatal stabbing of an 18-year-old convenience store clerk during a robbery in Oklahoma City. The victim, Jaden Anthony, was a young mother to a 1-year-old son named Braden. She was working alone during the overnight shift at a 7-Eleven store when the attack occurred on October of 2024. Surveillance footage reportedly captured the suspect, Anthony Gonzalez, entering the store around 2 a.m., greeting Anthony with a casual hello and engaging her in conversation as if intended to make a purchase. According to police, after Anthony opened the cash register, Gonzalez took less than $40 and then stabbed her once before fleeing on foot. Responding officers arrived shortly after to find Anthony in medical distress. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Gonzalez, who's now 24, was apprehended several days later through a joint effort by the Oklahoma City Police Department and the United States Marshals. He faces charges of first-degree murder and robbery with a dangerous weapon, and following a preliminary hearing, he was bound over for trial, remaining in custody on a paltry $10 million bond. His formal arraignment is scheduled for April 1st. Now, the district attorney announced his intention to pursue the death penalty, citing aggravating factors that render the crime particularly heinous and cruel. In a statement, the district attorney emphasized the gravity of the decision and said, our office treats the decision to seek the death penalty with the utmost seriousness. It is never made lightly and never made in haste. The determination is based on the careful review of the facts, the law, and extensive discussion with experienced prosecutors in their office. And based on that process, all the evidence in this case, we believe seeking the death penalty is appropriate, end quote. Family members have expressed, obviously, grief and outrage over the circumstances. And Anthony's cousin, Somer Goodian, recounted how the suspect exchanged greetings with the victims moments before the attack, describing it as an act of extraordinary audacity. Gooden has also highlighted the limited protective measures available to Anthony, noting that the store policy prohibited her from carrying a phone during her shift and that she had only purchased pepper spray for self-defense. Next, a Minnesota man charged with the abduction and assault of, wait for it, a 7-year-old. That's right, a 7-year-old girl was abducted on January 22nd, shortly after stepping off her school bus in Zimmerman, Minnesota. The suspect, 28-year-old Joseph Andrew Bragg from International Falls, Minnesota, allegedly took the child, a stranger to him, and drove her to Albert Lea, where she was found safe in his pickup truck after an 8-hour search involving hundreds of volunteers in freezing conditions. The girl reported being sexually assaulted during the ordeal. Bragg was arrested on site and charged with kidnapping and criminal sexual conduct involving a minor. He is being held in the Freeborn County Jail, and police know that Bragg has no prior connection to the victim or her family, describing this as a completely random act of violence. Needless to say, the child received medical evaluation and is recovering with support of her family. Next on the docket, this day in legal history, January 27th, 1825, President James Monroe urged Congress to approve the creation of the Indian Territory west of the Mississippi River, intended for the relocation of the Eastern Native American tribes. This recommendation facilitated the legal framework for subsequent forced relocations, including the Trail of Tears under the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Obviously representing a pivotal movement in the federal Indian policy and territorial law. On this date in 1969, the United States Supreme Court decided Spinelli versus the United States, the landmark ruling that refined the standards of established probable cause in search warrant affidavits based on an informant's tip. Building on the earlier Aguilar versus Texas 1964 two-prong test, which is the basis of knowledge and reliability of the informant. And anyway, that decision strengthened Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, influenced warrant procedures for decades. And on this date in 1988, the Senate Judiciary Committee unanimously approved the nomination of Judge Anthony Kennedy to the United States Supreme Court. He was subsequently confirmed by the full Senate and served as an associate justice from 1988 to 2018. His appointment proved consequential in numerous closely divided decisions, including civil rights, abortion, and same-sex marriage. Next, our legal quote of the day has to do with basically child abuse. A parent must serve a child's emotional and physical needs and protect the child from abuse from the other parent or another household member. End quote. Ladies and gentlemen, think about that. Can't let somebody abuse their children, even yours. And if you know about it, you can be complicit in that being charged. Think about that. And next, our dumb criminal of the day. More food violence, ladies and gentlemen. In a classic escalation of Florida's renowned tradition of unexpected legal drama, a 28-year-old Austin Simmons has earned the dubious distinction of today's standout in the misguided decision-making. Police report that Simmons, identified as a transient individual, found himself upgraded from a routine misdemeanor to a third-degree felony battery charge, all courtesy of a single open pack of ketchup. The incident unfolded as a bus terminal in St. Petersburg, where a concerned passerby, Carlos Mora, approached Simmons, who appeared unconscious on the premises. Upon awakening in the apparently an evidently foul mood, Simmons allegedly rose, advanced towards Mora, and launched the condiment projectile. The result? 2 modest spots of ketchup adorning the victim's jacket. Police recovered the empty packet from the ground, though its modest 0.3 ounce capacity evidently did not warrant preservation as formal evidence. Anyway, Simmons reportedly denied any assault of intent, maintained that he had merely given the victim the ketchup package, a defense that, while inventive, failed to sway investigators. What elevated this otherwise minor scuffle to felony status was Simmons' prior battery conviction from 2019, which triggered enhanced sentencing provisions under state law. A conviction on the current charge could carry a maximum penalty of up to 5 years in prison. Compounding his legal troubles, officers discovered a small quantity of a chalky substance during the subsequent search, identified as, cocaine, leading for additional charges of possession of a controlled substance. And Simmons remains in custody at the Pinellas County Jail on a $5,000 bond for both counts. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, a stark reminder that prior records can transform even the most seemingly trivial acts into serious offenses. And that, in the realm of improvised weaponry, ketchup packets rank among the least intimidating. Yet occasionally, the most litigious options are always available. So, sir, Mr. Simmons, you are our dumb criminal of the day. Congratulations, you made it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, have a wonderful day. And remember, the Constitution matters.